Hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Plan B Terraform. This is a game that we're going to have a look at today. It's just gone 1.0. I've spent quite a few hours with it actually, which is unusual. Generally speaking, when I do these overviews, it's just the first 2 hours of a game, bit surface level. But I did play a bit of it in pre-release and I will admit, I kind of fell down the rabbit hole yesterday, putting, maybe 4 hours into it, something like that. It is addicting. It really scratches that logistics, just one more turn, the factory must grow kind of mentality. However, funnily enough, it's not really a terraforming game, at least by strictest dictate. Now, I really like terraforming in general, but it's more of an accompaniment backseat to growing the population of the planet, the cities. Maybe that will change a bit later on because it very much does have all the moving parts of a long grind and it just keeps adding more and more things to it. But I suppose it's probably safe to say, looking at this, you probably know what to expect. What sets it apart is, in a word, simplicity. A lot of these systems and the way that they behave are actually very rudimentary, very fundamental, right? Examples being when you're transporting, say, things over long spaces, let's say by truck, by road, you pretty much have an origin point and a drop-off point, and that's how it works. And then you have depots that will proximity scoop with like a little drone, like your level 1 depot essentially takes up 1 square, and the hexes around it, 6 grids or however it works out, it will just magnet grab or deliver or just generally interact with whatever resource you tell it to. So it's very, very basic machine conditions, and then it goes on a massive planetary scale. And so look, as you can imagine, that's not going to be for everybody, and it is something that will kind of get a bit fiddly as you try and scale up. But it's incredibly satisfying, and it works, basically, is a big takeaway, because when you have less complex systems, you have less of a chance of different AI rule sets from different things stepping on each other's toes. So I wouldn't call it the most robust logistic suite, as in giving you options and quality of life and all that sort of stuff, but as something that's really basic, 1 + 1 = 2, and then you build your systems from that almost binary system. It's very, very solid and very addicting. And to keep it all going along, you essentially have a tech level unlock system that is just population gated. Maybe it changes in the future, but for the moment, that's the case. Actually, you know what? The temperature might have been one of the gates. But let's just say, generally speaking, the rule is once you get to population, let's say 100 or 1,000 or whatever, it will move on to level 2 or 3. It's all very just laid out plainly, but I appreciate the simplicity of it. And as you do that, we'll unlock more needs for cities. So when cities hit a certain population, they will be a bit more dynamic in their requirements. But also, that's what gates what you unlock for the next building. Much of the buildings need to, in turn, be built themselves. You need factories and assembly plants, and so you need to create a production chain for them. You can put stock limits on them, so I've been putting like 50 on pretty much everything except roads and rails. You need more of them. And again, it's more worried about scale logistics, but under a basic rule set. So things like clipping on trains, that just doesn't happen. The trains just go through each other and ignore each other. The only real rule is just make sure that at the end of each line there's a closed circle loop, because then it can just infinitely go back and forth, because each rail line is two rails that a train can go up and down on. I'm getting to a point now where I'm pushing the temperature of the planet up by pumping different greenhouse gases in. I've got 2 different types at the moment, and I'm getting close. I was hoping I'd have some footage of it, but we're not quite there. But we're going to start melting ice and have water flow happen. And if you hold Alt, you've got like a very handy resource overview, which shows you where the different pockets of, sulfur or aluminium are for you to mine. But also it gives you a predictor of what is in danger of becoming like a riverbed or, a shallow water area. And presumably that's going to flood entire cities or production sites. And I've already unlocked the ability to dam off and dam pump certain areas as well. So that's where the terraforming comes into it. Like I said, it's not really the primary dictate of you are here to terraform. It's more you're here to raise the population, and the terraforming is there to be like a gameplay embuggerance along the journey. I'm not complaining, but I feel like the framing might help as well. And, you know, it's already starting to get a little bit tricky. We've got some feedback loops that I need to deal with. Like, cities are starting to produce waste, metal and plastic waste, which in turn I need to, you know, create supply depots for them to spit out. I send that away and break that down into something renewable, so turn it back into steel or aluminium bars. And in turn, you want to feed them back into the system, because you can't just have the storage piles filling up. The game will actually bottleneck and block, and the waste is sort of the first step in showing you that. Accompany that with some of the depot systems. They've now introduced the ability to, say, tell it not to go above 50% storage until another storage adjacent is full. I haven't quite gotten the nuance of it, but I do see what they're trying to do or what it's there for. And it is to make sure that those bottlenecks fully never block up. So if you did have, say, a natural source of aluminium bars coming out of refining out of the ground aluminium, but you also had aluminium bars coming from a feedback loop from the waste material being repurposed out of a city, you can make it so that that waste material always gets used first as opposed to the new aluminium. And that way you'd never actually have a slowdown bottleneck on the waste. And so the city continues to grow. I mean, that's the working theory. And because of the nature of these sort of mechanics, how they get introduced, you know, you have your own system, you have your own idiosyncratic setup that you've already kind of established, and then this throws a spanner in the works. So I'm kind of at a point where I'm coming up with a perfect system to rework it. Talking about, you know, perfect systems and being a bit anal retentive about all that, the depots that I talked about, I'm on like level 2 depots at the time of this recording, which have extended that hex range another ring. So it's difficult to illustrate with words, but generally speaking, they will now jump up to 2 hexes away, which is interesting. But, you know, you start to wonder when you've got, I don't know, some more complex situations where you need maybe 2 inputs to create a third output, and now you need 3 depots worth in range and a way to service all 3 of them, probably via rail. You start having to come up with these systems so as to keep moving the depots through. And, you know, if you want a second depot, where do you place that? So you start coming up with some mad scientist ways of laying out essentially the depot drone hopping layout to service a train line, for example. And I guess ferries and all that will be the next thing once we've got water and that. So it's interesting that it's creating unique logistical problems because of the simplicity of the systems, like the intentional basicness of this carries from this block to that block and that's it. Go figure, go make it work. So I like it. It feels more primal, more fundamental, and, you know, in some cases more graspable. I haven't had any issues, any glitches, any problems, any issues with my cities or factory throughputs have been totally self-imposed. But yeah, it is one of those things where I look at it and I go, well, I really do wonder how it's going to scale. Surely there'll be more technology and stuff down the track. I get that. But it is one of those things where I feel like, well, if you're just going to make me scale this up to a globe-sized operation, it's going to be very fiddly, at least with this current tech. Anyway, look, the main takeaway, like I said, and to reiterate, is that it seems like a much more, again, meat and potatoes, 1 + 1 = 2, very fundamental, basic AI-driven systems to build your entire empire upon, and I find that to be a refreshing change. But I feel like some other people may be coming from this logistics heavy genre, like this is the only type of game you play. They may find themselves a bit frustrated because of the lack of, I suppose, quality of life finesse that you can usually bring to bear in these kind of games. But yeah, look, I'm enjoying it. And honestly, like I said, even though it's titular and it's more of a backseat, I am a real sucker for terraforming in any shape or size. The idea of the entire system that you are within evolving and changing and showing in real time results as it grows towards a more final destination. I find that to be really satisfying. So yeah, the whole package has been really fun for me personally. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.